Hello, once again. Very good morning. Let's get started with this 2 days demo classes today and tomorrow. Right. Basically, this is going to be one of the Oracle database administration workshop, meaning that as I regularly used to tell that, each and every concept as a Oracle DBA, what we are going to do it for our client or for our customers on day-to-day basis, whatever work, whatever the DBA activities, what we do it, everything will be like shown as a live demonstration here in our lab, and then you can feel that as if you are working on the client environment, and along with the each and every theoretical part, each and every theory topic, whatever the concept we're going to explain, everything will be like shown it in a demo format and executed in our live lab environment, and then we'll feel the output, so that that will give you great impact on as a DBA, how we used to work for a client or customer in the real-time environment, in real-time world. So similar concepts, similar queries, and similar activities will be performed here in our Oracle Live Lab environment, and then will be like felt the output, and then as if it feels like we are working on the real-time environment. That's why we call it as a Oracle workshop, because as I show all the demo activities, parallelly you have to execute by your own, and then you have to follow all the lab exercise, so that both it will like interactive, and then you can ask questions, and you can clarify any doubts and any queries whatever you have it along with the course. That's why we usually call it as a Oracle admin workshop rather than Oracle course. Give me a second, guys. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, give me a second. Hope you're able to see my screen, right? All right. Hope you're able to see my screen. Yes, no. There's some power glitch here, like my VPN got disconnected. I just reconnected. Right. So coming to this course, we have formed this particular course based upon the real-time world example, and then what needed for as a DBA day in and day out. Everything will be like covered as part of this particular database course. If you already gone through that course content, it's well and good. Otherwise, like you can just go through this blog and then get your course details. This is going to be like entire course content. We'll start with our environment setup, and then followed by the network concept understanding, and then installation of your 19C software, and then creation of your own databases, and then creation of the databases using manual method and using your DBA, or using RMAN clone, or so many other methods. So we'll see one by one how we are going to deal with all of these creation of your databases and other topics. And then we'll start with the differentiation between your architecture level, because with Oracle, so many versions, 11G, 12C, 19C, there are so many architecture changes happened. And then we're gonna see what all the architecture changes happened between all of these various database versions, 11G, 12C, and 19C. And then this course is precisely made upon for 19C architecture only. And then whatever the command, whatever the topics we're going to explain, it will be purely based upon 19C database. And then followed by your actual database administration activities. That will be like, our day-to-day task, like, managing the users, managing the table spaces, managing the data files, and managing your database growth and backups and recoveries, and your privileges, roles, and responsibilities. Everything will be like whatever needed for a debate activities, a debate task. Everything will be like covered over here. And then again, how you can manage your table spaces, your blocks, extents, and your segments, and then your data files. All will be like covered from the scratch. And then followed by your ASM architecture, and then your multi-tenant architecture. So here, like, we just mentioned few of the topics out of that, but we'll be cover much more along with these topics. For example, if I consider ASM architecture, I'll be like just mentioning ASM architecture, why we need ASM and its advantages, and ASM instance parameter and ASM administrations. I'll be saying only few of those points, but in fact, if you once we start our actual class, there will be like much more along with these ASM topics. So how you are going to add your disk groups, how you're going to drop your disk groups, how you're going to modify your disk groups and add a disk, how you can increase your disk space, how you can uh, create your disk groups with a high redundancy, normal redundancy, and external redundancy. There are so many other topics also will be covered, but only few of them like will be mentioned here in this part of course. But actually, once we start the course, it will be like much more what we mentioned here. And then we'll start with our multi-tenant architecture. Multi-tenant architecture is one of the mandatory things nowadays. So we will start with the multi-tenant architecture, your PDBs and CDBs, and then how the multi-tenant architecture will works, and then how you can clone your CDBs, how you can clone your PDBs, and then how you can take a backup of your CDBs and PDBs. All we're going to see it here. Followed by your networking. Networking is one of the networking inside Oracle. So your listener, TNS, your SQLnet, and then your services, how you're going to connect your database, your clients, how they're going to connect using your SQL developer, or using the Toad, or using the end user applications. And then what are the connectivity issues you're going to face it. All those we're going to deal here in the Oracle networking concept. And then user management, obviously, like user management is one of the very common or normal activity what as a DBA we used to do it, because we have to control the user privileges, roles, and responsibilities, and all those profiles. Everything will be like covered here. And then followed by your RMAN backups and recoveries. So how you're going to take RMAN backups and recoveries, what are the conventional backups, what are the RMAN backups, what is RMAN level 0 backup, level 1 backup, incremental backup, differential backup, cumulative backup, and then what are the tuning parameter in order to increase your RMAN backups and recoveries, and then how you are going to restore and recover your database, how you are going to clone your database using RMAN duplicate database. And again, in RMAN duplicate database, what is RMAN active database duplicate, RMAN database duplicate from the backup. So all those scenarios we're going to see it here when it comes to backups and recoveries, because backups and recovery is one of the backbone for my database business continuity. In case of any disaster or anything goes wrong with my production database, I should be having a strong backup strategy in order to restore my database very quickly and efficiently. So that backups and recovery is one of the very common activity in a DBA world. So we'll give more importance on that backups and recoveries, followed by your patching activity. So Oracle strongly recommend to apply the patches on your Oracle database on regular basis in order to keep your database in security compliance, and apply get the what are the latest features and new features, all the code fixes, whatever that hit by quarter. So everything will be like fixed by Oracle. And then Oracle releases the patches on quarterly basis. Oracle releases patches on every Jan, April, July, and then October. So we need to apply those patches using your OPatch and using OPatch Auto. How you're going to apply the patch on your ASM home, how you can apply the patch on your Oracle home, And once you apply the patch and binary level, how you're going to patch your databases at the database level using your data patch. All will be like seen in depth in clear understanding with a live demonstration on each and every topic. And then followed by your database upgradation. So database upgradation is one of the common activities for nowadays, because many customers are migrating for their 11G databases or their 12C database to 19C. So we're going to see multiple various methods of your database upgradation, manual method of upgradation using your DB upgrade script, using your DBUI GUI mode, and using like 19C new feature, something called auto upgrade is a new feature introduced in 19C. We'll see that auto upgrade tool, how you can make use of that tool and then upgrade your databases. All those scenarios, we'll see like 3-4 database upgrade from 11G to 19C, 12C to 19C. All these different scenarios, we're going to see it here as part of this database upgrade. And then followed by your data guard, right? We'll start with the scratch basics of data guard. What are the different types of data guards? What are the different modes of data guard? And what is my data guard architecture? What is what is the high availability concept? How my data guard will be helpful for in case of disaster recovery scenarios? And then how you can build your standby database, logical standby database, physical standby database, snapshot standby database. All these different types of standby database, we're going to see it. And then we're going to convert your database primary to standby, standby to primary. We can call it as a, sorry guys, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry
Yes,
for
yes.
that. There is some electric work going on. Bear with me for 2 seconds. Right. Let me share my screen once again. Right. So any questions in the meantime, you can stop me and then you can ask me on the on the chart, or you can directly unmute yourself and then you can ask me any question on that. Right. And then followed by that the database upgradation is one of the major topic what we are going to cover it here. And then followed by your shell scripting, because shell scripting is one of the common activities what we are going to use it, what, because as a DBA we cannot do everyday monitoring activity, right? Like there will be a lot of other tasks what we are going to do it in day in and day out. So for example, as a DBA, once I log into my whatever the shift you work, right? You may work in various shift, morning shift, afternoon shift, or in EST hours, EMEA hours. So the moment we log in, one of the job for DBA is to just to make sure that your database is available 24/7 and your listeners are available 24/7, and then there's no outage and there's no outage. Basically, there should not be any outage. As a DBA, like we should make sure that our database, our listeners, our services, everything will be like available 24/7. So for that, the moment you log into your shift, you have to verify your database is up or not, your listener is up or not, your database is how much is the free space in your disk group, how much is the free space in your local mount point, and then how many users are connected, how many blocking sessions, how many are running long running sessions. All these like monitoring activities you have to do it. So in order to do that, you have to run multiple queries and you have to spend at least 1 to 2 hours in every day whenever you log into your shift. So just to make that automate, you should be aware of how the shell script works, how your OEM works, and how your Python or whatever the programming language you like. You should know that how it works, so that you can automate all of these daily monitoring tasks. You can write your own shell script. You can write everything in a cron job, and then you can monitor it in regular basis. Whenever any of these services goes down, automatically you can trigger your own email alerting. For example, your listener goes down, automatically triggers the email alert to your entire team, so that you can immediately log in and you can restart your listener. Uh, Immediately your space or your disk groups goes out or your mount point is full, immediately you can trigger an email alert. So all this can be controlled using your shell script. Right. So that that we're going to start with the basic understanding of shell script, and then we'll try to write a few of the basic shell script, and then we'll try to schedule them using cron tab, and then we'll monitor them how the shell scripting works. So that's a basic concept of shell script what we're going to cover. And then followed by your export and import is one of the common activity, because in order to do any logical database object export and import. Uh, for example, your table space, your tables, your schemas, or any of the object which is logical to your database. All those like logical object will be like uh, migrated, will be like copied from one database to other database using your export and import. We'll see that those export and import, how it works, how you're going to export your tables, how you're going to export your schemas, how you're going to export your table space, how you're going to export your data file. All those concepts will be covered here. And then during that activity, in the consideration of real-time scenario, how you can pause your exports, how you can resume your export, how you can pause your import, how you can resume your import, and then what are the parameters that can tune in order to make my export import much more faster. For example, I can put my parallelism, I can exclude my gather stats, I can exclude my stats along with the exports. All this concept, like various concept, in order to understand your export and import as a real-time word example, because most of our DBA, like export and imports are very common, because when there is a new table comes into your production database, your developers or your end users frequently ask, okay, export that table and import into my development database, export that table and import into my test database. So those are like common activities we'll be getting. So we'll deal with that export and import, how it works. And then followed by your 12C and 19C new features. What are the new features and how we can make use of them? All those will be like understood here in 12C and 19C new features. And followed by your like performance tuning factors, how you're going to deal with your performance tuning at your database level. If somebody reporting my query is running long, my database is not responding, users are complaining, unable to run their queries, and users are complaining, unable to connect to their database, how you're going to check it out, how you can generate your AWR report, ADDM report, ASH report, how you can read them, what are the key factors you have to look into those reports, what is like your ASH report looks like, and what you're going to read it in your ASH report. And then based upon the real time scenarios, all these performance factors will be like discussed, and then will be like simulated in our lab, and then will be like given some of the recommendations based upon reading these AWR report, ADDM report, ASH report. What are your recommendations? Rebuilding indexes, gathering stats, and then your table move, table shrink, and then your gather stats at your schema level, gather stats at your table level, and then some of the SQL profiling. All those recommendations we're gonna come out of that by reading those your AWR report and ASH report. All will be like purely based upon your performance factors. We're going to discuss like 3-4 chapters here, and then followed by your resume and cover letter, and then some of the frequently asked interview questions. Those will be like discussed along with each and every topic, but at the end we'll be covering a mock interview. So I request like everyone, end of the course, they have to register, and then I'll be like conducting one-on-one with everyone, like how familiar, like how comfortable with their regular like interview process. So those will be like tracked, and then we'll be given some suggestions, and then regularly asked interview questions will be prepared. A bunch of interview questions and answers will be shared with you guys. You can prepare for the interview. So this is like quite compact like course what we made it based upon the real-time scenario. Any questions so far, like in consideration of this, any of this course content, or any topic is missing, you feel like any topic is missing here, or any topic we need to add it here, definitely that will be like taken. If this is just a course content what I mentioned, but when we start actual real classes, the course will be like course content will be much more than what we mentioned here. And then if there's any particular topic which need to be like discussed, and then definitely we'll be taking it as a extra classes, and we'll be like conducting some extra classes on regular basis, and will be covered over there. For example, this will be purely based upon your Linux environment. And then in few previous batches and all, like we got some request, like they wanted to show, they wanted to know like database installation on Windows. And then we went ahead and then taken few sessions on creating databases on Windows, using service account, using local AD accounts. And then some of the sessions they wanted to know about the wallets and security concepts, so we went ahead and then taken some of the wallet sessions, and then we covered those topics. So similarly, we include any extra topics if that is not included here in this course, that will be like always discussed, and that will be like always included as part of some extra topics or extra course after this scheduled content, right? So having said that, I'll proceed further if you don't have any queries. We have a dedicated WhatsApp group, so we already created, and then like I think most of you guys are already part of that who are registered for this course. I already added them, and then uh, all the communication is going to happen in that particular WhatsApp group, because that's a dedicated WhatsApp group for this particular batch. Any questions, any queries, I request everyone to post it on that particular WhatsApp group, so that uh, that will be like discussed with wider range, and then will be like communicated to the wider range, rather than one-to-one discussion. If you have queries and if you ping me personally, and then if I answer to you, the same question might be arise for the other guys as well, right? So just to avoid that, any questions or any queries, you can directly post it on our WhatsApp group, so that I can directly reply or response over there, and then so that other guy also will be like aware of that what's happening, right? So there's a questions here in the chat. Do you cover rack concept here? Basics of rack will be covered here. What's the difference between your database standalone or rack, and then how rack works, and then how database standalone works. So that will be covered. This is going to be purely standalone with your ASM, and then with your database. This like will be like standalone. That will be like core concept what we're gonna deal with over here. But will be covered few of the basics concept of rack, and then how the rack works, and rack comparison between your standalone and rack. But we have a separate rack course which will talk about purely on the rack, 2 node rack, 3 node rack, and then all the rack concept will be discussed over there. But this will be like limited to your standalone database. But however, as I said, like will be covered some of the basics of your rack concepts. Right. So and then we have, if you're not aware, we already have our dedicated Telegram group where we're discussing a lot of other things. It's like publicly available, and we'll be discussing a lot of technical stuff. So if you're not aware, just go ahead and then join our Telegram group, and then there will be like regular technical sessions will be conducted, regular live webinars will be conducted in our YouTube channel. I request everyone to go through YouTube channel and then see some of the technical content over there, and then we'll be posting regular new technical concept over there in our YouTube channel. And then my blog, malikjyotriflowerblogspot.com. So I'll be writing some technical content over there, and the new concept, whatever I hit on day in and day out. So I request everyone to follow my blog, so that that's going to be like same blog what we just saw here. This is my blog. So any technical content, I'll be like keep on writing here. There's a one recent content, like I was like trying to install uh, Windows, like I was trying to install my Oracle on Windows. I got something called this particular error message, Vara 5000, and that is something to do with your Java settings at your Windows side. So we'll be like writing some technical content, whatever I face in day in and day out. So that's one of the regular activity what I used to do. Like writing your blog or writing your creating your own repository is very good, and then that will give you good impression when you are going on an interview. So I strongly recommend everyone to start writing their own blogs and start collecting their own workbook mentioning all the day in and out, because you'll be working in your client and customer environment, and you'll be like facing number of challenges, number of issues. The moment you face any issues, write it, like what is the issue, what is the troubleshooting ways, what is your solutions, and how you fix it. These are 3-4 points. You just put it together, and then that will make you more comfortable in your DBA world. Like what is your issue, and then how you troubleshooting that one, and then what's a workaround for that, and then how you're going to fix that one. So just put 3-4 lines, so that you can refer it anytime you wanted to need it. Whenever you hit the same issue in any other customer or any other client, you can just refer that. So that's the best habit you have to follow it. At least if you're not able to write a blog, at least try to collect in your own repository, or your own way how you're going to collect it in your work, in your notepad, or your Word plus plus, or your MS Word. Like you try collecting all of them. By end of the year, you may see that you will be like pointed out hundreds of issues, and will be very familiar with them. And then whenever you hit the same issue in next time, and then just open that master note what you prepared, and then search for that error message. Boom, like you'll be getting that issues and resolution and solution, right? So you have to follow those kind of best practices so that that will help you for the longer run. Right, so having said that, that's a quite compact course content, how the course is going to be like scheduled. And then these, whatever the sessions we're going to conduct, every sessions will be like recorded and then uploaded into our Google Drive. All those sessions will be like uploaded and then will be like discussed on a regular basis from our Google Drive. Whatever the course content, whatever the course book, whatever the workbook, whatever the lab exercise, and then everything will be like kept into our Google Drive. We'll be getting access on this Google Drive, and then you're gonna, if you miss any of those topics on that particular day, you're gonna go through that Google Drive content and you're gonna revisit them, and you can watch those recorded sessions, and then you can comfortable with that particular day's topic, right? uh, these are like few of the examples. I just prepared here some of the prerequisite sessions, so there'll be already like 12 sessions I uploaded. So these are like, very basics which are needed for this particular course. For example, Linux basics and some of the networking basics, some of the installations, and some of the SQLs, and some of the common as a ground rule, whatever needed for this particular course. These 12 topics, I strongly recommend everyone to go through these 12 topics, so that you will be very comfortable with this particular course. Because the moment I start database, uh, if you're like, there are like some guys who are like not into IT background, they will be like confused, what is database, how I need to correlate with my real-time world. So those are like basic questions they will be aware. They may or may not be aware. And then there will be like some guys who are already experienced, and then they are like much more advanced, and then uh, both of them, to make them in sync. So I strongly recommend everyone to go through these particular pre-recorded sessions. These are like very handy, which are like absolutely out of this particular course, but very mandatory to understand before we get started with our database classes. So if needed, like, you can just spend 1 or 2 days and then try to complete this 12 classes, so that you will be like very comfortable, and you can ask more questions during our live classes. So without these prerequisite sessions, even you can able to understand our regular classes, but you may feel some little challenges or some difficulties. You may lose in between, and then you may not be able to ask any questions in during the classes. If you are go through all these 12 sessions, and you'll be much more comfortable positions, and you can ask any question. So I strongly recommend to go through these particular 12 sessions. And then once you just go through all these 12 sessions, we'll be creating a dedicated directory for this particular today's batch, and then we'll be like uploading all those content. And then every day the classes will be like recorded. For example, if I go to daily classes, every day classes will be like recorded, like day 1, day 2, day 3, like that. And then on the same day, for example, day 30, it talks about export and import. And then similarly, there's the next folder called daily session logs. And if I go to day 30, that is export and import. And then those are the run log, whatever we're gonna run it on our lab. On our lab, whatever the lab will connect, and then whatever the lab we connect and we execute all the commands, whatever the commands we're gonna execute, all those queries will be like shown. And then at the end of the course, we'll be like copied all the commands, whatever we execute in our lab will be like copied, and then will be attached as a notepad here. So that when you practice on your lab, so you just open this particular notepad, and then just copy paste those commands and then execute in your lab. So that's just to make your life simple, just to make sync between what we teach and what you practice in your lab. We're just going to capture session recorded videos along with the entire session log, what we're gonna execute in our lab, so that that will make you more comfortable when you are practicing in your own lab, right? And then along with that, the course materials will be following this particular entire PPT. Whatever this PPT, it's like master PPT, which will be like having whatever needed for this particular entire course. And then this each and every topic, whatever we discuss, will be like attached with the lab exercise here. The moment you open that lab, it will be like having the lab instruction, what you're going to do, and then how you're going to deal with this one. So this is what we're going to cover here as part of this particular course. So you have to follow this particular entire master note. This is entire master PPT, and then all the topics will be like attached over here. Whichever the lab you are going to execute, all those labs will be like attached over here. For example, here lab 1, lab 2. If I open lab 2, it is going to talk about how you're going to add the groups, how you're going to create the users, how you're going to create the directories, how you're going to start with your database installation. So this is kind of your uh, master PPT. We're going to follow this single PPT for entire course. So this PPT has itself all the lab exercise will be like attached to over here. And then if you want to get your lab exercise, we have dedicatedly uploaded a database lab exercise here. So whatever we are going to see those lab exercise, so the same lab will be like attached in your master PPT. You can refer that particular master PPT, or you can open this lab exercise and then you can execute those commands by your own. So you can refer both master PPT or this lab exercise. Both will talk about the same thing. And then along with that, there are some advanced topics, your DR, your export import, and other tools, and other like patching tools, and other like your performance tuning, and then some of the basic tools, whatever needed for our course. Everything will be like included here. And then for that, I think I already said this particular database course workbook, how you're going to use those different directories. We will start with our course materials. One of these prerequisite session, whatever I just shown you, the 12 session, you have to go through and read them. And then how you're going to install your Linux ISO image. So you're going to this is a particular e-delivery site, or you can go to your Linux ISO image. Here you can see your Linux ISO images. So these are your Linux ISO image will be available for your installation practice. And then the third topic will be like your Oracle softwares and Oracle patches. You can go to this particular tool here, this particular directory, Oracle softwares and patches. All your 12C, 19C, all the patches and softwares will be like included here. And then your ready VMs. There are several ready VMs which are available. You can download them and you can use them. If you want to install it by your own, you can install it. If you are having challenges in the installation, there are already several ready VMs are available. You can just download them and you can use them. If I go here, ready VMs, I have a standalone ready VM and rack VMs. For example, if I go in a standalone VM, if I go on a rack, I have a 2-node rack setup with the grid, 2-node rack setup with the grid and database using Oracle user, 2-node rack setup with the grid and Oracle using your ASM and database using grid and Oracle. So different rack setups are available. You just download them and then you can do a setup on your own laptop or desktop. It will be like ready labs are available. If I go on standalone, I have Oracle Lab 1, I have Oracle Lab 2, Oracle Lab 1 with the database, Oracle Lab 2 with your ASM and DB, Oracle Lab 1 with your ASM and DB. Different labs are available. Just need to download that. For example, if you download this Oracle Lab 1, this is just a VM box. Inside that, you can install your database. If you download this one, it will be like already Oracle VM is available with your database installed on that. You can just practice that. If you download this one, your Oracle Lab 2 with your ASM and database are ready. You can use them. Either by downloading this one, you can install your own VM, you can install your own database and ASM, or you can directly download this and then you can use it for a practice purpose. So anything you can practice over here. So these are kind of ready labs which are already available. Those about ready VMs, and then there are some Oracle study materials. There are like much more study materials we uploaded here. For example, if I go to this Oracle e-notes, these are your Oracle notes, which has more like information, your Linux basics, your Oracle DB, your daily activities, and your commands. All will be like available here. You can just use them. These are like advanced topics which will help along with this particular course. You can just make use of them. Those about your Oracle ebooks and notes. And then there are several sample interview questions. If I go here, there are a lot of interview questions and answers. Or you can just refer them for practice purpose, and then it will be like helpful for when you are attending your real-time interview. So that's about your interview questions and answers. And there are like thousands of automation script will be uploaded here. If I go to monitoring and automation script here, like you can see this is it has like thousands of automation script. So these are like SQL script which are written by me for this my entire 12 to 13 years of career. Like whatever the commands, whatever the SQLs, I use it for managing my clients and customers. These are like SQLs mandatory or common SQLs we are going to execute at the DB level, and we can do a database health check and we can do a database monitoring activities. So you can just make use of them. and then you can use it in your development lab and then practice them. And then if you're comfortable with this script, and you can go ahead and then implement it in your client environment, and you can use it for managing your production environment, right? So this is like, and again, these are like thousands of scripts. You're not going to use all these thousands of scripts. You have to you have to check all of this script, and whichever needed for your own environment, you can go through that and then you can use them. Because there's like thousands of script, you're not going to use this entire thousands of script in day in and out. Whatever needed for your client environment or your customer, you can just make use of them. But make sure that you have to test them, you have to uh, execute them in your development or your test environment first before you are implementing it in your production environment. So these are like some of the basics what we are dealing with as part of this course. And then as I say, like, we'll be creating a separate group, and then we'll be creating a separate folder for this particular tool, this particular course, and then every session will be recorded and uploaded to our Google Drive. That's any questions so far with the course content or with the whatever that lab exercise, or any questions or any confusions, you can always stop me in the middle and you can feel free to ask any questions, or you can post your queries in your chat here. I'll be monitoring the chat as well as I'll be like answering your queries. Great. Again, this is course content, what we discussed just now. Okay, there's one questions here. Help for certifications, right? Obviously, this whatever this course what we're going to cover, which has, and then also there's a follow-up question like study materials and preparations and test etc. So obviously this course, whatever you're going to get it has too much things. The moment you practice this entire thing along with this whatever I showed you just now, with all this lab exercise whatever I mentioned here, this all the lab exercise along with this particular course, whatever the recorded session, you can go through them. The moment you complete this course along with your all the lab exercise, along with all the whatever the extra materials what we mentioned in our guide here, these are your ebooks here. What I say, like, these are your ebooks. The moment you complete all of these ebooks, there are thousands of, you can see, like, there are so many scripts uh, uh, that just to go inside your ebook, there's a Oracle DBA section here. The moment you go inside your Oracle DBA section, there will be like many PDFs, many ebooks here. You just need to practice all of them. The moment you practice all of them, obviously will be able to crack your any certification exams, and then it will be like much more what that certificate needs. But the only thing is you have to be like ready enough to go through all of this, and then you should be able to comfortable with all of this concept, so that you can easily crack the Oracle exam, your OCA and OCP. But you have to practice them, otherwise, like, it will be without practice or without reading all this content, will be like feel hard to crack your OCA and OCP exam. First thing is you have to understand the concept and then practice them, whatever the lab exercise or whatever the course materials, whatever the PPTs are mentioned here, so that you'll be much more comfortable to crack any of those Oracle exam. Right, and then some of the advanced topics like your OEM architecture and other things will be like covered at the end of this course, or not during the course, because first we'll try to complete your entire course content, whatever the schedule, and then on top of that, if there any particular topics you want to wish to learn, or you want to go over, for example, your Oracle wallets and securities or licensing, or your data guard broker or your OEM. So those will be like advanced topics, will be like covered at the later point as a extra classes, with combining with your previous batch and then this batch, and then will be like covered as a extra classes. Right, and then again, these are the lab what I showed you in our Google Drive. So you'll be getting all the access on this lab, which workbook and other things. You just need to practice them. Right, so I hope like you are much comfortable with the course content and then the course whatever we're gonna cover. If you're good, and then I'll start with some of the basic concept for today and tomorrow, and then we'll start the regular classes by Monday. So this course is going to be on weekday batches, Monday to Friday. Monday to Friday. That's a weekday batch. It will be like every day 9 a.m. IST to 11 a.m. IST, Monday to Friday, and then Saturday Sunday no classes, and then this is going to be like approximately 30 to 45 days. With this entire course will be like completed, and then today and tomorrow, the 17th and 18th, it's going to be like 2 demo classes, followed by 19 and 20s are like weekends, and then 21st is the one where we're going to start our actual classes. So, and then I'm going to share my Zoom link, other details in our WhatsApp group for the guys who are like registered. I hope like already I've added, I created a batch, I created a WhatsApp group for this batch, and I added all the students who are registered, and then I'll be sharing more details over there, and then our actual classes will start on 21st. Right. So just to cover some of the basic concept as a DBA, let's take a paint here. If you work as a Oracle DBA, some of the basic concept like Linux is a must, and then after that you should know your SQL basics, and then you should know your networking. Some of the basics like not advanced. Networking is a other concept. You should be aware of that. Your Linux and your SQLs and your networking. These are like 3 very basic fundamental things you should understand, so that you can easily and you can comfortably work as a Oracle DBA. It is not mandatory to you have to learn your advanced Linuxing, like your troubleshooting your grub or internal boot issues and other things. Not much details. You don't need to worry about your Linux in advanced concept, but basic things you should be aware, like what is Linux, how I can log into my Linux environment, how the PuTTY sessions, how my WinSCP works, how my MobiXterm works with the Linux, and what are the basic commands, your CD, your PWD, create user, create directory, create file. What are those basic commands, how it works? So those are like basic fundamental things you should be aware of that. That will be like covered as and when we progress this particular classes. And then basics of SQLs, very mandatory. You should be aware that how you are going to connect to your database using your SQL command prompt, and then how you're going to query your database. So your SQL is mandatory. You have to understand your SQL concept, and then you should be very familiar with your SQL concept. That's other basic fundamental will be covered as part of this course. And the networking, it will like very mandatory. You should understand again basic concept of your networking, because most often you will get that end users are reporting unable to connect to my database, TNS connection lost, connection timeout. In that case, how you are going to check the connectivity between 2 Linux servers, check the connectivity between your application server and your database server, check the connectivity between your Toad and your database. So all those basic checks, whatever needed for as a DBA work, those are the basic concept you should be able to understand. And then once you are able to understand those basic concepts, so you'll be like able to handle any sort of issues as a DBA in day in and day out. So these are like mandatory things you have to understand, and then you have to be like familiar with that. I'll just try to get into some of the SQL basic now. I'll just show you a few, 1 or 2 things, and then that will give you some insight that how this SQL is going to work, and then what uh, as a SQL as a DBA, like what I need to understand uh, as this particular in order to handle my database in day in and day out. So this like your SQLs here, like I just already uploaded this SQL concept into our Google Drive. There's a one SQL note which I prepared here. That SQL notes will talks about the basic understanding of what as a DBA what I need to understand before I get started with my DBA career. Uh, how you're going to connect your database, how you're going to query your database, what are the concept as a DBA I need to understand. SQL is a language in order to communicate or in order to query your any database. For example, if you have a database here, uh, you have your database here, like you have your server here, one of the Linux server you can assume, and then inside that you have your database here. And then inside that database, you're going to store the data. You're going to store any tables. You're going to store any data or any of the end user data or any of the business data. You're going to store it inside the database. And then in order to store the data or in order to read the data, your common language is your SQL. SQL is stands for your structured query language. We are going to use that SQL and we're going to query my database and we're going to read the data, whatever available inside my database. And then in order to insert my database, any data, we're going to use that SQL language to insert any of my data inside my database. So SQL is very, very mandatory. You have to use that, you have to learn that SQL language first. If not, you no need to learn your, there are two concepts here. One is your DBA, database administrator, and your database developer. So your database developer job is to understand your SQLs and PLSQL, because those are the ones who are going to write complex queries and you are going to deal with your end user or business data. But as a DBA, my job is to manage that particular, whatever the data is coming inside my database. My job is to make sure that manage that data and then protect that data. So in order to manage and protect that data, you should be able to understand the SQL concept, because you're going to connect your database using SQL and you're going to operate anything at your SQL level. For example, just I wanted to show you one thing, like how you're going to connect your database. First thing is you have to connect your server using your mobile XML or PuTTY session, whatever I'm doing it here, with whatever the user, root or Oracle or grid, whatever the user you have it, you have to connect to that server first in order to access this particular database. As I said, this is my Oracle Lab 1. This is my Linux server. This is your Oracle Lab 1. Oracle Lab 1. This is your Oracle Lab 1. And then inside this Oracle Lab 1, you have created a database here. This is your DevDB. This is your database you created. In order to access that database, you have to connect to that server first. So that's what I'm using it here. This is your mobile XTerm. Mobile XTerm is a utility or the tool where you are going to access your Linux server using your mobile XTerm. So using that IP address, I connected with the root user for this particular Linux server. And now you're going to connect to, in order to access that database, right? Whatever the DevDB I told, in order to access that database, this is my DevDB. I need to use something called SQL. Whatever I'm talking about here, basics of SQL. I need to access that particular server using this particular SQL. So I need to first log into that particular owner. This is my DevDB. If I scroll it right side here, this is Oracle is my owner for that DevDB. I need to log into that Oracle user. I need to use something called SU, switch user. I'm going to switch user to Oracle. Right now I am at root user here. Root connected to this particular server here. And now I'm doing switch user to Oracle. The moment I do it, now I connected to Oracle user to this Oracle Lab 1 server. Right, and then once you connect to your Oracle user, now you're going to set the environment to that DevDB, because I have 3 databases here. Which one I want to connect to now? I want to connect to DevDB. So for that, I'm going to use something called dot space VoraEnv. The moment I type my VoraEnv, it's going to ask me what is my Oracle SID, Oracle SID, Oracle identifier number. So I'm just going to pass that DevDB. Then if I do env pipeline grep capital Vora, that will tell me like what are the environment variable I connected to my server, my database. Now I can use simply SQL plus /SSDBA. It will connect to my database. Now I'm inside my SQL. Now I can do any operations. Now I can do any of those SQLs, whatever that SQLs, whatever I'm talking about. I can do any operations in order to access my database. In order to access my data, whatever the data available inside this particular database, I can use any of those SQLs commands, and then I can retrieve my data. And then in this particular SQLs, SQLs is not a big deal. Like it does not have any operations. It has only these. I'm just going to highlight here. It has only these 4 set of languages, 4 set of data types, 4 set of major categories in my SQLs. One is your DML. We can call it as a DML, data manipulation language. And then other one is your data definition language. And other one is your transaction control language. And then a 4th one is your data control language. Your entire SQL is segregated into 4 types. These are your 4 types. We often used to tell that, like, data manipulation language, data definition language, and transaction control language, and data control language. These are the 4 categories you can complete. If you understand these 4 categories, you can able to complete your entire SQLs. First, I'll talk about your data manipulation language. That is your select, insert, update, and delete. These are the 4 subcategories. What will be like? Those are really like part of your data manipulation language. So select in the sense, if you have any data inside your database, we're going to use that select to read the data. Insert means if I have a table, if I want to insert a new record into my table, I can use the insert table. And then update is if I have a record inserted inside my table, if I want to modify any of those existing records, I can use this update. If I want to delete any of the records from my table, so I'm just gonna use delete command. So if I want to simulate much more here, much more in advanced feature here, inside my database, I have something called the student table here. This is my student table. And then this particular student table has 4 columns. I'm just gonna make 4 columns here. This is your student name and your student number, and then the student name, and then the date of joining, and then the fees. So these are like common 4 columns: student uh, number, student name, and then your date of joining, and then your date of admission or the fees. So these are your 4 columns. uh, if I want to insert, if I want to select that column, right? For example, if I connect to Malik user, I have one default user created here. Probably I have that student table here. Select star from student. I don't have that student table here. Do I have Oracle user here? I don't have that Oracle user. Okay. So anyway, we'll check that one. So in order to access any of your table, if the table is already exist, you're going to use that select statement. For example, select star from student. For example, if I want to connect, just let's connect back to Malik user. I can show you for employee table. Select star from tab. Okay, I have something called employee table here. If I do select star from employee, so this is my employee table. I have 14 records here, and then all this like employee number, employee name, job, manager name, and hire date, salary, and then commission, and then the department number. So these are the columns, and then this is your employee number 7839, name is King, and then job is president, and then he don't have any manager, he's the boss, and then hire date, when he hired, and then what is the salary and what is the commission and which department is going to work. So this is a common one single row for this particular table, employee table. Similarly, if I take here my student table, I have a student number, student name, and date of admission, and then the fees, how much is fees is given. Like, I just use something called select statement to read that data, whatever available inside my database. And in order to insert that data, I'm just going to insert. Like, for example, if I go down here, there's the insert column here. This is my sample create student table. If I want to run this particular create, I'll just run this one to create my student table. Right, table created. If I do select star from student, so this table does not have any record. If I want to insert any record into this particular table, I'm just going to use something like insert statement here. Like insert into student, and then student number 1, and the name of the student, and then date of the admission, and then how much fees he has given. So this is a simple insert statement. Right. So this is your simple insert statement. I'll just comment, sorry, modify this single quotes here. Right. So this is single insert into student. That's insert into student. Insert into student. That the student is a table. I'm going to insert a record. The values are nothing but the records. I'm going to insert one as a student number, and then name of that student, and then date of the admission, and then the fees. This is simple insert statement. What I'm going to insert into my student table. insert. T is missing here. So this is just a simple insert statement. What we're going to insert the record. Now you're going to run the same select star from student. It's going to give you one record from your student table. This is a simple concept how you're going to deal with that particular table records, right? So as a DBA, we're going to we're going to execute these SQL queries day in and day out. So first you have to be very familiar with how you're going to insert the record, how you're going to read the record, how you're going to modify the record. If I want to modify this record, so I can use something called update. So if I go here, update statement is here. Update student table, set fees equal to 10,000 and student number equal to whatever it is. Just I wanted to update the table. Like I'm just going to update. Right now it is a 3,000 is a salary. I'm just going to make it as a 5,000 for student number 1. Right. I'm just going to update that whatever the record. Right. So update table. I'm just going to update the student table. Set what I'm going to do. Set fees equal to 5,000 where student number equal to 1. Student number is equal to 1 is this guy Krishna. And then I'm going to update his fees equal to 3,000 to 5,000. So one row updated. The moment I do again select star from student. And then now the fees got updated to 5,000 from 3,000 to 5,000. So this is like basics understanding of your SQLs, how you're going to deal with. There's nothing hard and fast rule here. You have to understand only these 4 subset. The select it to read the table or the read the content inside your database. Insert is to insert the new records. Update is to update the records, and then delete is to delete the record. Whatever the record you have, like any number of records, you can just delete them. And that is for operating at your data level. And there's the data definition language. It is a creation, like at the table level, a create table, and then alter table, a drop table, a truncate table. So if I do a truncate or drop table, like truncate table student, it's going to truncate everything. Drop table student, it will drop the table. And then alter table student, right now it has the 4 column here: student number, student name, student date of joining, and then the fees. I want to add one more column called address. I can use that alter table student, add column, and then address. I'm just going to add one more column. So these are like data definition language will be at your table level, and data manipulation language will be like data level inside the table. And then transaction control language is commit or rollback. If you are doing this, whatever the transaction you are doing it, right? Like the moment you did a update statement here, you feel that this is going to be your wrong update. Instead of 6,000, you updated as a 5,000. So it's a wrong. So you can use something called rollback. So the rollback completed. The moment you see select star from student here, and then it will roll it back to whatever the records, it will roll back. This insert statement is the wrong insert statement. Whatever this update statement is the wrong update statement. The moment you roll it back, everything will be like rolled back from that student. It will go back to the previous state where it was. Now if I do again, I'll do one more time insert statement, insert into student. Now you inserted one record inserted, and then now you can do select star from student. This is one record inserted. Now this record looks perfectly fine and good. And then I can use something called commit. Commit means it's a permanently writing your data into your table. So now you got it. Now you can try to do a rollback. It will not roll back because nothing new data, everything is committed. Rollback completed. If you do select star from student, still that data is persistent here. So that become, if the moment you do commit, the data become persistent. The moment you do rollback, whatever the changes you have done it will all roll it back to that to the point in time where you started your session, or the point in time where the save point was created. So that those are your transaction control. Like whatever the transaction you do, whatever the insert, update, delete, whatever modification you do, how you're going to control the transactions by using your commit and then the rollback. And there's a last category, that is your data control language. That is like controlling your transactions, controlling your database operations, like whom you are going to grant, who all users are going to access my database, who all our users are going to have that database access to create the database, or to create the tables, or to create the tables, insert the records. All those like grants and revokes. Grant is to create the privileges, and then the revoke is to take that privileges back from that user. So these are like 4 categories. If you understand that 4 categories, So we're going to cover much more once we start our class. It has like many more topics here. We'll be like covering as one or two topics on this SQLs, because SQLs is very, very mandatory, important stuff to understand before we start as a DBA. Right. So that's about your SQLs, the basics, what you need to understand. Just try to learn your SQLs. And then these are the four major categories you need to understand. Once you are familiar with these four categories, and then you can work as a DBA, like you can run any commands on fly. For example, if you want to check your users, how many users are available in my database, I want to check that one. I can simply use select star from DB underscore users. I know DB underscore users is a table. I can directly query my DB underscore user tables. I can list out all the user list, whatever available inside my database. So in order to operate as a DBA, first you need to understand what are the basic commands are needed for SQLs. Your data manipulation language, data definition language, transaction control language, and your data control language. If you are familiar with these uh, four types of categories with these major keywords: insert, update, delete, and create, alter, drop, truncate, commit, rollback, grant, and revoke, then you're very much comfortable to work as a DBA, and then you can write any commands on fly when you connect it to your database. Right. So that's the basics what you need to understand as a DBA before you actually start your day to day work as a DBA. And then much more things I mentioned here in this particular SQL note. You just try to go through this one, and then again once we start our class, we'll be covered one or two topics on this particular SQLs to make you much more familiar. Right, so that's about SQLs, and then coming to Linux. Again, Linux is one more things, very mandatory things. As a DBA, we should understand how you're gonna deal with your Linux environment, and then how you're gonna understand your Linux partitions, and then how you're gonna connect to your database. All those things are like, as a DBA, you should understand the Linux. So if I start with the Linux concept, so Linux will start with the slash file system here, root file system here. And then once the root file system done, it will be like having multiple sub partitions. If I go here, right, like this is the root partition to start, and then followed by your so many sub branches inside that. If I go here, right, so these are like so many branches will be available. This will start with the slash partitions here. The moment if I do slash, it will be like your root partitions here, the root directory. And if I do ls inside that, you will be like having your bin, you'll be having your bin here, and then you'll be having your boot partitions here, and then you'll be having your dev, and then you'll be having your etc, and then you'll be having your library op proc. There's so many like users. These are your root partitions here, and then uh, followed by your all those uh, whatever the whatever the subdirectories available inside your Linux. The moment I have like separate topic for that as well here. If you want to understand your the root partition, slash is your root partitions. That's a parent directory, and then all your subdirectory will be like followed using that parent directory. The moment you install, the parent directory will be always slash, and then followed by your all the boot directories will be like all the partitions will be like made over there, and then each of those partitions will be like useful for whenever you are dealing with your databases. Basically, the Linux maintenance is purely your Linux admin job, but as a DBA, we should understand some of the concept, some of the directories in my Linux. For example, if I talk about my etc, if you see like etc, what is this etc directory transfer? It contains the configuration files. For example, I have my cat slash etc Varatab. Varatab is a database. It contains your database details, which database running on which Oracle home. All those details will be like available inside etc Varatab. That's my one of the database configuration file. If I do cat etc Varatab, I have these many databases. You can see DevDB, DB, and DB Tulsi. These are like four databases which are configured in this particular server, which are running under this particular Oracle home. This is one of the configuration files. So you should understand what are these the root partitions or sub partitions inside my Linux, what they will do it. The bin is a binary executables. Boot is your root boot or grub or configuration file. In my Windows, how my C drive, right? Like this C drive is the one which has my operating system, right? Like program files, Windows, whatever this Windows, like this is my operating system. The moment my Windows system starts, it will read that C drive partitions and it will start it. Similarly, in Linux, we have boot partitions where you can see your you can do just CD. CD is a change directory / boot, and then that will take you into boot partitions. If you do PWD, present working directory, that will be like /boot. And the moment you do ls, you will see all these grub configuration files. These are your boot configuration files, your config files, your grub config files. All of these configuration files, the moment you start your Linux, first thing it will read your grub configuration files and it will start your VM. So that's your boot partitions. Your dev is all the devices, all the new drives, new devices, everything will be like contain your in your dev. Similarly, all this like different partitions will use it in a different situation. For example, I have something called home directory. Home directory is what? If you create any user, all those user home directory will be created inside home. For example, if I go inside home, PWD, I'm inside home. All these home directories will be like created here. Like Malik is a user, and Oracle is a user. John is a, these all users. They have like home directory inside this home. If I connect the same, if I do like ifconfig is a command to check the IP address. If I reconnect, if I take a one more session for the same server, click on this session here, click on this SSH, like enter. Now I'll connect with the Malik user, Malik, and then if I enter the password for that Malik user, and then directly it will go to, if I do PWD, you can see like home and then the Malik. He will directly go into his home directory. Whatever operation he do, he will be like inside his home directory. And then similarly, if I try to connect to one more user, I have one more user called Oracle. If I take a one more session here, a session, SSH session, and then if I connect with Oracle user, and then if I enter the password for that Oracle user, and then Oracle will go Oracle and then connected to this Oracle lab one. If I do PWD and then home Oracle, they all individual users, they will all go into their respective home directories. So that's the concept of your home directory. Home directory, like all the users, everything will be like placed under their respective home directories. And then one way to verify how many users are available, just directly go into your /home, just do -ltr, and then you will see what are the users are available inside your Oracle home. There's another file called password file /etc passwd, and then cat that one, you will see how many users are configured in this particular server. You can see Malik user, John user, Oracle user. These are the users who are configured in this particular Linux server. And then these are your service account. These are like service account get created once you install your Linux. But these are the these are the custom users what you created in this particular Linux box. And you can see home Malik, and you can see home John, and then home Oracle. These are the home directories for those users. So that's a basic understanding of your Linux partitions, how it will start. It will start from your /root partitions, followed by all the sub partitions. All those sub partitions will be like used based upon the different scenarios. Right, and then you're gonna add the partitions or add the disk whenever there's a need. For example, if I want to do df-h here, wait a second, what we can do. Let's see here. Do I have any disk here? SD star. But I don't have any disk here. Okay. So what we're going to do here, one of the activities, you often used to see the different partitions here. Let's see, mount. Right. So if I do df-h, sorry, you mount, not unmount. You mount, right, to df-h now. Now we don't see anything. Um, we often in Linux, the Linux box, whichever Linux box we log in, the moment I do df-h, we'll see many partitions. We used to see like slash backup, slash archive, slash control, slash redo. We used to see many partitions. Many partitions are many mount points. For example, if somebody adds any new disk, and then we need to uh, add, like for example, right now if I go inside dev ll sd star, I don't have any like fd sda is my boot files which started with my database. For example, if I do fdisk hyphen l fdisk hyphen l, you can see this is my sda1 and sda2. Dev sda, that's the default partition, default the storage which is allocated with my Linux installation, 100 GB. And then those 100 GB like divided into two partitions, sda1 and sda2. And then those partitions are used for my different mount points. For example, my sda1 I use it for boot, and my remaining root partitions I use it for my root slash partitions. And then if I add a new disk SDB, I can use that new disk, and then I can mount it as a some particular mount point. For example, if I go here, I can say f disk. If I do ll dev, I can see that particular new disk, whatever that added SDB. I can format that using f disk dev and SDB. That will format your disk, and then you can mount that disk into a separate mount point. If I want to quickly add a disk, like if I want to add just a 10 GB disk for this particular server, I can just in a backend I can quickly add one 10 GB disk if needed here. Like if I do LLSD star here, right now I don't have, like I have only SDA, that's a 1 GB disk. So that's a default disk which is coming from my Linux. So I'm just in the backend, I'm just going to add one 10 GB disk, so that I can show you that how you're gonna add it. Like for example, if I go here, I just added one backend here. You can see this is the SDB 1 GB disk I added at the backend side. So if I do f disk hyphen l, you can see this particular 1 GB disk here. SDB dev SDB, which is like 1 GB disk, which your Linux admin is going to add, and then he's going to use something called your f disk to format that disk, like f disk, and then your SDB, which is going to format your that newly added disk ll sd star. You can see this is SDB new disk which is added. That's a 1 GB disk. You can use something called f disk hyphen l, which will give you the disk size and then the disk information. That disk is not formatted here. For example, dev SDA, which is formatted as a dev SDA1 and SDA2, and then this SDB, which is not formatted here. And then this is the new disk I just added at the backend here. And if I run this particular f disk dev SDB, which will format that particular disk. Right. So f disk dev SDB. So this again your Linux admin task, but it's a good to know that how my partitions are worked, how my partitions are coming, from where they are coming. So these are like simple disks. They're going to add it at the backend. Once they add it, they're going to use something called f disk dev SDB, and then it's going to ask you want to create a new partition. N is for to create a new partition, and you want to create a default is a primary partition. Primary partitions are the extended partitions. I'll go with the default primary partition P. And what's the partition number? Default partition number is 1. And then what's the primary sector? This is the primary sector of my disk. And then this is my last sector of my disk. This is my last sector. I'll go with the default. And then W is to save. And then the moment I do LLSD star, and then I can see SDB. Whatever this second disk added, it will be like formatted as a SDB1 now. Now you can mount this disk as a separate mount point, whatever mount point you want. Right now you don't have a backup mount point here. I'm just going to add the backup mount point here. So for that, I'm just going to use the format, and then I'm just going to add into my etc fs tab, so that it will be like permanently mounted. So here, like this is the word, or this is like workbook. You can open this particular workbook here. that will talks about whatever I'm teaching right now. If I want to go into my whatever the disk formation here, right? So here what we did, like we created this FS tab. We created this partition fdisk sdb. I created a primary, new partition, primary sector and last sector, and then w is to save. And then I'm just going to convert that whatever that dev, I'm just going to convert it into format using etc extension 3 mkfs make file system, and then it format your extension 3. These are like your, like in Windows you have something called format disk, right? For example, if I go here and then if I do format, we have something called ntfs and fat32, whatever the format you're going to disk, you're going to format in Windows. Similarly, we're going to format that using your mkfs, ext3 and ext4 and whatever the file system format supports. If I go here, I'm just going to format that sdb1, or you can format that sdb, whatever the disk you want. You can just format that. Proceed anyway. That's going to format your disk. Once you format your disk, and then you're going to mount that particular disk. So for that mount, you're going to just create one Vara archive backup directory here. I'm just going to create one directory here, Vara archive. I'm just going to mount that one. Mount your dev sdb, whatever that new disk you added here, your Linux added, he is going to mount that disk into your Vara archive mount point. Right, it's mounted. If I do df-h, and then you got your mount point here, Vara archive mount point, which is of 1 GB mount point. You got it here. Similarly, you see in your Linux environment, Vara archive, control, your backup, or many mount point you used to see that. Those mount points are all coming from the backend storage, and your Linux admin is going to add that one. And then you want to unmount that one, you mount, and then that particular mount point, and then that mount point is gone. That mount point is gone. Again, do that mount, and then your mount point is coming back. df-h. So these are your mount points, and then these are like dynamically you mounted and dynamically you unmounted. In case of this particular Linux server reboots and this particular mount point is not mounted automatically, what you need to do in that case, you want to mount this particular mount point automatically. What you need to do in that case? For that, there's something called cat. There's something called etcfs tab, file system tab. Fs tab is stand for file system tab. This is your mount point configuration file. You have to add inside that particular file entry, this particular whatever the Vara archive mount point, you have to add inside that, so that whenever this particular Linux server reboots, automatically that mount point will be like mounted. If I do here, this is a command you need to add. Just do vi/etc fs tab. I'm just going to go into new line here. I'm just going to add this one, like your dev sdb, you're mounting it as a Vara archive, and this is etc extension 3 file system default and 1.1. These are your default entries. I'm just going to save this one, so that whenever the server reboots, automatically the moment your server starts, it will read your etcfs tab and it will mount that particular mount point, df-h. And then if I do unmount once again, and then I can simply use umount, and then I can simply use mount-a. If I do mount all, this is mount all. Mount all, what it will do? Mount all, it will gonna read your etcfs tab file, and whatever the mount point you mentioned inside that, it will mount all. Mount-all is the command. You can just type it. The moment you do it, it will mount that particular mount point. Right. So this is like a common procedure as a DBA. As a DBA, like we used to do that, day in and it's not like our day in and day out task. Whenever this mount point is full, we are going to inform our Linux admin, okay, this mount point is full. You're going to add the space, or you're going to increase the space. He's going to add some backend drives, and then he's going to increase the space. So we used to see as a DBA, we used to see that like many mount point, like archive, redo, control, backup, all those mount points will be there. We have to make sure that mount points have enough sufficient space and all the mount points are mounted, and those are the common activities what as a DBA we are going to do it. So that's about the your mount point operations, what you're going to deal with. Any questions so far, whatever we talked about this mount points? Right, and then any questions about these partitions? So I think it is too much because once we start with the course, that's where you'll be like more familiar and you'll try to get into it. But at this level, high level, what I'm talking about, it should be like uh, at the high level things, whatever I'm doing it here. But as a DBA, you should understand how the mount point works, how the partitions works, and then other concept is your M repository. Your M repository is like, in order to install your any RPMs inside your VMs, you have to use something called your M repository. So the M repository will be like configured inside your etc m repo.d. If I go etc m.repo.d, and then you will see like all these M repositories are configured here. That's a default when Linux admin installs. You will be like configured with your all the M repositories. You just need to do any RPM you want to install, like M install telnet. Telnet is RPM. You can go ahead and install your telnet. Right, you can see your M install telnet. It's going to connect your public M repository, and then it will find out this particular RPM is available in my public M repository. Do you want to download that and you want to install that? If you want to click yes, it's going to download, and then it's going to install that RPM. Installation, install your telnet RPMs. How you can verify that RPM is installed or not? There's a separate command I mentioned. M install telnet. It's going to connect your public M repository, and then it will install it. How to check whether the RPM installed or not? RPM QA telnet, and then that will tell you this telnet RPM got installed here. And then if you how to remove that particular RPM, you have to use like RPM hyphen QA telnet. It will give the telnet RPM here. You have to use something called RPM hyphen E, and then you have to use that RPM name. That's going to remove that RPM. So you remove that RPM. Again, query the same RPM hyphen QA grep telnet, and then you don't see that particular RPM here. You don't see that RPM here. So this is simple. If you configure your M repository, and then it's going to give you like easiest way to install any RPM. M install RPM, M install Oracle, M install Xclock, M install your any RPM. Whatever the RPM you want to install, you can just use M install and then the RPM name. You'll just install your RPM. And then if you don't have the you don't have this you don't have this M repo, like M repo will be set up. Make sure that your etc m.repo.d is set up properly. These are your M repo is set up here. What I'll do now, mkdir bkp, I'll just move all of this repository into bkp. Move star your bkp. Done. So your M repo is empty now. You don't have any M repository now here right now. You don't have any M repository. And then try to install your same command. Try to install M install telnet. It will not work out here. It says M configuration, like to enable your M repo list. There are no M repo list. M repo list all. There's no M repo list. Like this is a command to list out your M repo. M repo list, there is no repo list. You are not configured any M repo list. Then how you can install your RPMs? In that case, you have to manually download your RPM. You have to use something called this one, RPM IVH, and you have to use this that RPM. And then you want to upgrade, you have to use that UVH. So there's something called public M repository. You have to go there, and then you have to download public M Oracle. So you have to 7, 6 different version has a different versions. Go to your Oracle M repositories, x86 64, and then search for your telnet. Right. So this is your telnet RPM, what we installed just now. You have to download this RPM locally, and then copy that RPM into your. I'm just going to download it here into desktop. So this RPM is downloaded here, and then you can use something called your WinSCP. WinSCP is a tool where you can use this WinSCP to copy your files from your Windows to Linux or from Linux to Windows. So I'm just going to use connecting to the 10.38.102. I'm just going to use the root user, or you can use your any user, whatever the Oracle user, root user, or whatever user you have it, just use that username and password, which will connect from you. This is your left side is Windows desktop, and this is your Linux desktop. So go to your desktop here, desktop, and then your telnet. Okay, this is your telnet RPM here. just copy the telnet RPM here. It will be like inside your home Oracle. Inside home Oracle, you just copied that RPM. Go inside your home Oracle, ls-ltr. You will see this telnet RPM is came here. So if you don't have your M repository, manually you have to copy, manually download those RPMs, manually copy those RPMs. You have to use something called RPM-IVH and then those RPM names. And then those RPM will get installed here. And then verify the same command RPM QA. Where is that one? Okay. RPM-QA grep telnet. So that will tell you telnet got installed now. So this is like manual method. RPM, IVH for your installation. UVH is for your upgradation. If there is a new version of RPM, you can use this UVH. Or IVH is for installation, U is for upgradation. This is like your manual method of installation of RPMs or removing your RPMs. If you have like M repository setup, you can directly install using M install. So that is your how you can play around with your RPM, because as part of your database installation or Oracle installation, there are certain prerequisites RPM you need to install. So either you can use M install or you can use your RPM command to install that. So that's about your RPMs and then how you can install those, how you can play around that, how you can custom install using M install, or you can install manually using RPM command. And then some other useful tools at the DBA. One is your WinSCP. WinSCP is for, again, as I said, you have to install that WinSCP tool and you have to connect, which will help for connection between your Windows to Linux, Linux to Windows, and then copy files between your Windows and Linux and Windows. Right, so that's your very common tool, what we're going to use it. That's one thing. And then a putty or MobiXterm are the terminal sessions which is used to connect to your Linux server. I have putty session here. This is a putty software here. I have to use that IP address of my Linux. If I do ifconfig here, so this is my IP address of the server, and then I can use that IP address. This putty or MobiXterm always use the port 22. I need to give that IP address, and then always port 22 is one that SSH service will be like listening, and then I need to use that IP address or the host name with the port 22, and I need to connect that one. So that it will ask you to connect who is the username. You can connect to whatever the username and password you have, it root, Oracle, or any user. I'll just connect with the Oracle user, and then it will ask you to enter the password. Enter the password here. So this will be like connected to Oracle user, connected with Oracle user for your Oracle lab one. So this is like a putty is a terminal session where which will help you to connect your Linux server, because this Oracle lab one somewhere in your remote data center, right? Somewhere in your London, US or UK, wherever it is. As a DBA, we are going to access that Linux server using your putty session. Or you have like MobiXterm, you can just click on this session here and then click on this SSH session here and then enter that IP address, whatever the 10.38, 10.38.4.102. Whatever that IP address or the host name, you can just enter and then click on connect. And then again, it will ask you to enter the username and password. You can use that whatever the username, root, and whatever the password. Right, and then it will connected with the root user and connected to your Linux session. So this is like your terminal session. Whenever you want to access any of your Oracle servers, you have to use either MobiXterm or whether you have to use your putty session. That's a handy tool. What we're going to use it as a DB operations on day in and day out, which uses both my port 22. And then there's a Windows server. We are going to use something called remote desktop. We are going to use like something called remote desktop here. Remote desktop. If there's a Windows server which is available remotely on your data center, you want to access that one. We are used called remote desktop connection, and we're going to use that IP address. Again, the putty and MobiXterm is to the terminal session to access your Linux servers. In order to access your Windows server, which is in your remote data center, you have to use something called your RDP, remote desktop connection, and you have to enter that your IP address of that Linux server. sorry, IP address of your Windows server. Right. So you're going to use this one, right? You're going to use this uh, remote session, and then it will connect to your Windows remote session here. And then once it is connected here, that will like your remote, like this is your remote desktop. How you're going to access your RDP of your Windows, and then whatever you're going to access PuTTY and MobaXterm, that will be your Linux session. So that's your Windows remote desktop will use 3389, and then remaining your PuTTY and MobaXterm will use 422, and then WinSCP is for your copying files between your like Windows to Linux or Linux to Windows. And then if you want to copy the files between your Linux to Linux, there's something called WinSCP or SFTP or FTP. There are other tools. We're going to use that software to copy the files between your Linux to Linux. Right. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover as part of this particular today's demo session. Some of the basics of your Linux and some of the basics of your Windows, and then some of the common tools. One important thing is your software download, right? Your software download. Um, they're like you're going to download your Oracle software. You're going to download your Linux softwares. Those all will be like available with the help of your Oracle e-delivery. For that, we prepared this particular slide. Where is that one? I think this is the workbook. You can open this particular workbook. That will pretty much this talks about how you're going to download and where you're going to download. All the screenshot are attached over here. For example, if I go here, you have to go to this particular Oracle e-delivery site. Once you go into e-delivery site, which will ask you to register, you can register using your personal email ID and password. You can register that. Once you register it, you can pretty much type Oracle database. And then the moment you type Oracle database, you'll see various versions of Oracle database. Just select whatever the version you want, 19C or 11G and all, then continue. And then whatever the Linux you want, you can just search for Linux, Oracle Linux 7, Oracle Linux 8, and then checkbox that and then download them. So we're going to see it once we start our regular classes. We're going to see it how we're going to download all these softwares and how we're going to install them. And then once the softwares are ready, you're going to install them, and then you're going to set up your own lab, and then you're going to proceed with your installation. So all these screenshots are attached here, how you're going to download and then you're going to install it. So that's one of the things you have to make sure, that you have to download the latest software from your Oracle e-delivery. You can directly go into your Oracle e-delivery and you can log in with your own personal email ID. You have to first register with that email ID and you can download any software from there. So if I just sign in, I already have my account. I just sign in here. If you want, like if you are signing for the first time, you have to sign in with your own ID. You have to create your own ID. And then enter your password, and then that will log into your that Oracle e-delivery, and then you can search for any software. You can search for Oracle e-delivery, sorry, Oracle Linux. Oracle Linux is the one thing. Oracle Linux, you can search, and that will list out all the various versions. So what we're going to teach, it is 7.9 here. Just going to click on that, it's going to add it to cart here, and then you can search your Oracle database. Oracle database 11G, 12C, and 19C. 19C is the what we're going to teach here. So you can just search Oracle database 19C. The very first 19C Oracle database 19C, just add that one here. It will add it to cart here, and then continue. And then it will select the platform, what platform you want. I want for Linux x86-64. That's my database. And for my Linux, I want for x86-64. And then continue. And then this terms and conditions agreement, just checkbox, click OK. Then you will see all of this. You will see all your database software here on top, and then your Linux software here in the bottom. So you have like various softwares here, various ISO images. We don't need of all of them. You just need to download this first one, which is like 4.5 gig. You just download this ISO image, just click on this ISO image, it will start downloading it locally. And then you have something called your database client here and your database software here and your grid software here. You need to download this grid software, just click on the zip file, it will download your grid software. You need to download this database software, just click on this one here, it'll start downloading it locally, this particular software. So we're not going to download this client here. We don't need to download that, and we're not going to download all of this. So we're going to download only this ISO image here, and then we're going to download your database software here. We're going to download your grid software here. These three software is mandatory for our database course. So we're going to download. Just click now here. It will start downloading it locally. Already downloaded, so I'm not going to download them here. So this Oracle eDelivery is a site where you can download your database software. You're going to download your Linux ISO image. Once the Linux ISO image is ready and your database software is ready, using Linux ISO image, we can use something called our Oracle VM VirtualBox. We're going to use this Oracle VM VirtualBox. We're going to just add this plus symbol here, or we're going to create our new virtual setup here, and we can use that ISO image, whatever you downloaded. We can install our Linux server first. Once the Linux server is ready, and then we'll proceed with our database creation. So this we can see it in our tomorrow's demo, like how we are going to create your Linux ISO, and then on top of that, how we're going to create the database. We're going to see it in our tomorrow's. Along with that, some of the networking concept. We'll see that we'll see the demo on like how we can install that Linux 7.9, and then followed by your some of the networking concept. We're going to see like what are the basic understanding of your DHCP, name server, and other things. And then we'll see some of the Linux basic commands and how you're going to create your database. That will be like in our tomorrow's demo class. Right. So any questions so far, whatever the topics or whatever the course content, if you have any questions, we'll feel free to ask, we'll discuss them. Otherwise, like we can stop it here today. Right. So yeah, anyway, like if you have any questions you want to chat here personally, you can send out to me one-to-one on the chat group here, or you can feel free to unmute yourself and then you can ask any questions. And then tomorrow once again we'll cover some of the networking, some of the Linux basics, and then we'll try to see that installation of your Linux, and we'll try to see that installation of database, and then some of the basic networking and Linux commands, and then the other topics we'll see tomorrow. Right. So if no questions, then I think we're good to stop it here, and then we'll see tomorrow, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Malik.